oddly, when you have a relationship when you're older, you feel like even though you technically have less time, you feel like you have more time because you're not rushing to meet those obligations.
When American author Candace Bushnell released her first book, a collection of essays called Sex and the City, she had no idea the impact that she was about to have on the world. And she had no idea that that book and those stories would go on to form one of the most iconic characters of the 21st century, Carrie Bradshaw. And that character was roughly based on Candace Bushnell's life. Since that moment, things have never been the same for Candace. And now, this is going to shock you, she's 60. From Mamma Mia, I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to No Filter, candid conversations with fascinating people. I first met Candace Bushnell in 2003 when she was launching a new book in Australia. It was a novel. And at the time, Sex and the City was at its absolute peak. We were having watching parties. I can't even remember what night it was on, but everyone was drinking Cosmopolitans. And I was the editor of Cosmopolitan magazine. And Candace and I spoke about sex and love and relationships and advice. And she did seem like a slightly kind of more experienced version or more hardened version of Carrie Bradshaw and the iconic character that Sarah Jessica Parker played. Here's the thing about Candace. It's really hard not to see her as Carrie Bradshaw. When you're talking to her, when you're looking at her, she even looks quite a lot like Sarah Jessica Parker. She's kind of tiny and she's blonde and she's always wearing super high heels. And she loves New York. Her sense of fashion is just off the charts, fantastic. And she also dated Mr. Big, the actual real Mr. Big that character was played on, not Chris Noth, the actor, but he was based on an actual person. But unlike Carrie Bradshaw, Candace never married her Mr. Big. She did get married, but it didn't quite work out. Her life has had many ups and downs, and when I found out that she was releasing a new book called Is There Still Sex in the City? About marriage and divorce and friendship in your 50s and even Tinder in your 50s and ageing and all of it, I knew that it was time to check in with Candace Bushnell again and get an update from the original Carrie Bradshaw. So here's Candace Bushnell.
Hi, Mia. How are you?
Good. I wanted to start where you actually started the book, which is the day that your dog dropped dead in Manhattan.
That was really shocking, as you can imagine, because I left my apartment the way I always do with the dog. I didn't have my keys. I didn't have my cell phone. I didn't have any money because I just thought I'm going to go out, walk the dog, and come back. And then an hour later, I came back with an empty leash in my hand.
Tell me a little bit about where your life was at that stage.
That felt like it really was the beginning of, hey, I don't know if this is working, if my life is really working. I really, really felt burned out. And I think that that's something that happens. There's burnout, and then it just felt like kind of one thing after another was going wrong. And then I just felt like I can't keep battling.
You'd come to New York. You were the version of Carrie Bradshaw that you made famous in your Sex and the City book, which of course became the TV show. What struck me about reading about that time is that people get confused, and you've been quite candid about this in the book, people get confused about someone being famous and someone being rich.
Yes. I mean, we don't really talk about money. There's so much secrecy around money. And one thing that happens is, if you don't talk about money or if you don't consider it, you really can end up getting kind of screwed.
Of course, the impact of financial concerns on single women, that's something else that I felt came through so much in your book, because many people sort of talk about Sex and the City, your original book, as being about sex or about being about New York. It was in some ways, but it was really about the generational shift of women who were in their 30s at that time and didn't need to be married, and what did their lives look like?
Exactly. And that was, because I came to New York in the late 70s, and then I started working like right around 1980. There was a big cohort of women who went to the big cities and they were looking to have it all. And a lot of women found careers and they found they could make enough money to support themselves and they didn't have to get married. And a lot of them didn't. And it's interesting today, I feel like I meet more and more younger women who are, I mean, they're definitely, putting off having kids or, they're all really working on their careers. A lot of them just aren't even sure about, marriage and kids. And it's interesting that, if women don't have to get married, some women won't.
You didn't marry your Mr. Big.
No, I did not marry my Mr. Big. And now my Mr. Big lives in Vermont, and he is happily married.
When I last saw you, you either were just about to get married or had just got married. Tell me about your wedding day and about the decision to get married, how that came about. My
ex-husband and I, we decided to get married really quickly. I think we had known each other for 3.5 weeks.
Wow.
Was it that or 3 months or something? But we had not known each other for very long. Maybe we'd known each other for 3 months. And we decided to get married. And we got married really quickly. And we were thinking about eloping. But a girlfriend of mine said, no, don't do that to your mother. She'll be really upset. So we had a wonderful little wedding in Martha's Vineyard. In Nantucket. And, we were married for 10 years and it worked for a while until it didn't.
He was a ballet dancer.
Mm-hmm.
How did you meet?
We met at a gala for the New York City Ballet. He was a principal dancer with New York City Ballet. So he played all of the lead roles. The Prince, and the Nutcracker and those kinds of things. Mm. And we met at a gala, and we actually saw each other across the room and locked eyes. And I really did have that feeling of, this is the person I'm going to marry.
And you hadn't had that before?
No, I hadn't.
How old were you each when you got married?
I was 43.
And was he much younger?
He was 10 years younger. But, one of the things that happens is you can sort of end up in different places. Mm. And I was really starting to feel like I wanted to maybe leave the city, and he was feeling like he did not want to leave the city.
Sex and the City, the first book was so about your friendship group in your 30s in the city and those sort of characters. Tell me about the people who were in your friendship group as you were in your 50s and what kind of places those women were at in their lives.
I think one of the things that happens as one gets older and you go through life and you have kids and that sort of thing is that you are less involved with the girlfriends that you had when you were single. Because, part of it is you all have that same lifestyle. And people who are married tend to be friends with the parents of their children's friends. Mm. And people who are married and have kids, their lives really revolve a lot around their kids. So there is a certain time in one's life where you do lose touch with those kinds of friendships that you had when you were single. And then what happens is that, for me, a lot of it came full circle. I got divorced, and then a lot of my girlfriends who were married got divorced as well. And it's also a time when you really need your friends in a different way. There can be like sadness, and there are things that people go through, the death of a parent. People get sick. So in a way, it could be a deeper friendship.
In your book, I learnt a lot of new terms. One of them was MAM, middle-aged madness. Right. Can you explain the symptoms of MAM and some of the ways you saw it play out in your 50s?
Well, middle-aged madness is it's a term that I coined for this period of time where everything seems to go wrong. And it's a confluence of events. For instance, if you get divorced and then you have to move and then there are financial issues, and because of the time that it is, a parent might die, and then there's menopause, and that brings on a lot of changes, and children leaving the nest. So it's a time that in the past you maybe would have been retiring. So when these things happen, they're not so glaring. And also, if you stay married, you can kind of absorb all of these things. But on top of these life passages are women who they have to start all over again.
Mm. There's a generation of women that you talk about who perhaps put their own careers aside to raise children, and then their marriages ended either because they wanted them to or because their husbands wanted to leave. And you talk about what a precarious situation that puts them in, not just financially, but their whole identities.
Yes. I mean, if your identity for 20 years has been married and a mom, when that's taken away, there's a question of like, who am I and where do I fit in? And you kind of have to reevaluate. Children really give people a purpose. And when the kids although now everybody says that the kids today never stop needing you. So there you go. But children really give you a purpose, and marriage gives you a structure. So when those two things go, it could be a bit of a free-for-all. And also, there's also a feeling of, I've got to go out there and have fun before it's too late because I'm only getting older.
Did you go on Tinder when you were single?
Tinder experience was very, very interesting. And I think probably one of the most interesting things was that actually at first the app set an age range for me. And I think when I went on the app, I was 56, 57 maybe. So it set the age range of men I might be interested in from 58 to 65. And there were no takers. So then I set the age range myself manually, like 22 to 35. I got probably 200 responses, which was very strange. And I talked to a lot of I actually did the story because an editor came to me and she was in her 20s and she said all of her friends in their 20s were on Tinder and they were having terrible experiences. So I interviewed them and I went on Tinder, and I have to say that I actually had a pretty good experience, but I talked to a lot of people who really had terrible experiences.
You write about going to a bar and trying to catch the eye of someone in the old-fashioned way, being with your eye rather than with your phone. Right. And, that is such a difference between the single world, and particularly the New York single world of the 90s that's depicted in Sex and the City and now. How are you making sense of all of that, and what does it mean for those older women?
Well, there's a huge difference. A lot of young women, when they watch the show, when they watch Sex and the City, they say there's no way that, nobody ever has that many dates. Nobody even goes on dates. It's hard to explain that actually, yes, they did. And back in those days, the problem wasn't finding someone to go on a date with. The problem was finding a commitment and finding someone who you wanted to marry. And also, you had to go out if you wanted to, if you wanted to meet someone, you could not, you had to leave your apartment. Today, you meet somebody sitting in your bed scrolling through your phone. And the possibility of a random of a random meeting that sparks something is taken away. People aren't open to it because they're looking for someone on their phone. And of course, that's the age-old way of meeting people is you're out there, you run into people, and, that's how it happens.
How did you meet Mr. Big?
I met him at a party.
Common denominator, hey? It's funny thinking about that and about your husband.
Yes, and in fact, I met my recent boyfriend also at a party, and that way of meeting people still works for people who are, I think, my age, because they're really still open to that idea of going someplace and meeting someone or being fixed up. Although plenty of people are on apps.
You write a lot about men who've perhaps gone through that reproductive cycle. They've married, they've had kids, the kids have grown up, and then they start that whole reproductive cycle with much younger women.
Yes.
Do women in their 50s fall through the cracks almost?
Yes. I think one of the things that happens for a lot of women when they get back out there, so to speak, is that what they find a lot is that guys your age aren't attracted to women your age. So a lot of guys in their 50s and 60s are not interested in women in their 50s and 60s. And I have to say, as a woman, it is kind of a shock if you go out there and start dating and you're, hey, these 50 and 60-year-old guys, they seem old. You kind of have to get over that.
In terms of dating younger, cougars was such a kind of, I don't know, feels like a 10, 15, 20 year ago phrase. But you talk about something in the book called cubbing.
Yes, and this goes back to that Tinder experience when I made the age range younger and I got all kinds of hits. This is another strange kind of phenomenon of today, is that I kept hearing stories about women my age who were getting hit on by guys really 30 years younger and being really perplexed and kind of shocked by it. And it's because the younger guys grew up with different ideas about what's sexy, thanks to porn.
Yes, it's all about the MILF, the mum I'd like to fornicate with.
Yes, it's all about the MILF.
And is that nice or weird?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes these kinds of encounters, they can work for both parties. For women, it's kind of a great way to get their toe wet. Toe wet. That sounds so wrong. To sort of dip their toe into getting back out there with someone who they're not going to marry, and they're probably not going to have a relationship. And they don't want that.
I think some people would have a view of you that you're quite out there. You wrote a book, Sex and the City, which was quite revolutionary and spurned this incredible, iconic cultural zeitgeisty TV show and movies. But I've heard you say that there are some things that the character of Carrie did in the show that you absolutely wouldn't have done and that you didn't agree with.
Well, those are things like, having Mr. Big marry somebody else and Carrie had sex. Carrie and Mr. Big had sex. There was that whole kind of thing. I mean, that's something that I morally would never do. But it's also something that so many women came up to me and said, oh, they were so thrilled that Carrie did that because they would do the same thing. So I'm probably just more prudish than a lot of people. I feel I'm grateful that Sex and the City was such a big hit. And, I don't have too many complaints about it.
Sex and the City was so much about, or being in your 30s in New York was so much about kind of look at me. And what was glorious about that is that even though these women were in their 30s and then in their 40s in the show, there was still, they still had it going on. Let's talk about the issue of invisibility as women gets older.
Well, after a certain age, actually after the age of 50, in some ways one is literally erased because demographics used to stop at the age of 50. But also, our culture's filled with ageism, and it is a real thing. And even as one gets older, it's so ingrained, ageism. And at a certain point, you feel invisible. You are invisible. People just don't look at you. The experience of going in and buying something at a store and the person does not look at you. Of course, that could just be this day and age, but it happens to men as well. And a friend of mine who's 65, he said, Candace, I go into a party, and he said, I feel like I'm invisible and, nobody looks at me. But he said, I also really kind of like it because I can overhear what people are saying. We do kind of think that people who are older and show signs of aging are less important.
Candace, you spent $4,000 on on a face cream.
Oh, I know.
That was one of my favorite sections in the book. Can you tell that story?
First of all, I was feeling very, very down. I think I'd just gotten word from my father that he had cancer. I think I'd just gotten word that he had maybe 6 months to live. And I was feeling very vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable. And I kept walking by a store where they gave out packets of free face cream. And so I took the packet, and then I got talked into going into the store, which is always a mistake, and buying some eye cream that took away the puffs under the eyes, and I felt better. And then they convinced me to come in for a facial. And I think because I was feeling very vulnerable, and I really wanted something to work. And I ended up in that chair, and actually they wanted $15,000 for the face cream.
Oh, my God.
And I was just shocked. It's also, I think, a story just about this incredible wealth gap. It's shocking to me. It shouldn't be shocking, but it's shocking to me that you can spend $15,000 on face cream, and that's what they wanted.
So you got a bargain, really.
And I managed to talk her down to $4,000, but I really did not think I was getting out of that chair without paying something.
As part of that consultation, she asked you to tell her how much you spend on fillers, how much you spend on Botox, and you talk about Botox and fillers being just the two basic pillars of anti-aging.
Exactly. The reality is Botox and fillers actually work. The idea of a face cream working and keeping you younger, no.
How do you know when to stop with Botox and fillers? How do you know when to stop?
Well, hopefully you look in the mirror. Hopefully you have a doctor who says, don't do too much. But look, Botox and fillers are not going anywhere. And to me, what's interesting is not that older women get Botox and fillers, but how many younger women do it. How much plastic surgery there is amongst, teenagers and people in their 20s. The reality is that if people can improve their looks and can afford to improve their looks, they will.
Do you think Botox and fillers have become like the new blow dry?
I think it's been the new blow dry for a long time.
Candace, tell me about your life now. On the cover of your new book, Is There Still Sex in the City? You look very glamorous. You've got a beautiful purple dress with feathers and high heels, and you've got your two big standard poodle dogs on a beautiful chaise lounge. What is your life like? Tell me about today.
Well, I work a lot. I write a lot. I mostly spend my time writing, so it's not very glamorous. But it's glamorous to me because I love what I do. So that's really 90% of my life is getting up, working, exercising, making dinner, working. And I don't worry about too much else. And then if I have a book coming out, then it's a great time to glam it up and have fun.
Do you live in New York still?
I do. I have an apartment in New York, and I have a small house in the Hamptons. So I go back and forth, and there's a part of me where it's pretty easy to just, stay home and work. So I really do try to go out.
And you have a boyfriend?
And I have a boyfriend. He loves to travel, so we do travel a bit.
Do you live together?
No. He's got I mean, between us, we've got 5 places.
Wow.
So, no.
How would you decide which one of them to live in, even if you did want to live together?
Oh, I mean, it would be like if we lived together, it would be a lot of rearranging at the moment. I'm not saying that it's not ever going to happen, but it's not going to happen tomorrow.
And how is dating for you and having a relationship different at this age than it was in your 30s?
It's calmer and it's less fraught. I mean, oddly, when you have a relationship when you're older, you feel like even though you technically have less time, you feel like you have more time because you're not rushing to meet those obligations. You know, you're not rushing to, we've got to get a place together. You know, you're not pushing to have children and start a family. You can just kind of let it evolve. You know, if you don't spend every night together, it's okay because you have your own lives. So it's like you feel like you can be with someone and not be on top of them. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Because you're not trying to like rearrange the molecules of the relationship so that you can feel better about your life. Do you know what I'm saying? In a way,
you're not looking for someone to complete you.
Exactly. I mean, most people who are in their 50s and 60s, they already have a life, and I think people want a little bit less drama. I mean, everyone's seen drama, and it's just that feeling of no, can't do that again.
No drama, that sounds good.
And I mean, basically what we're saying is that, people are more mature, and that's a good thing.
That's a very good thing. This age certainly has a lot to recommend it. Candace Bushnell, thank you so much.
Oh, Mia, thank you. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
We're all done. Thank you.
I hope that was great. I love talking to you.
It was brilliant, and I loved the book. It was just so wonderful. You can find Candace's book, Is There Still Sex in the City, at any good bookstore now. Thanks for listening to this episode of No Filter. If you'd like something else to listen to, then I think you should check out our daily entertainment and celebrity news podcast. It's called The Spill. It's hosted by our entertainment editor, Laura Brodnick, and influencer expert, Kee Reese, and it's your snackable afternoon podcast. Just goes for 15 minutes, and that's enough to catch you up on the most important celebrity news and entertainment stories of the day. And we like to say that The Spill takes celebrity news just seriously enough. They talk about everything from why Taylor Swift wants us to cancel culture to why the Queen is feuding with a pony. Follow the link in our show notes to subscribe or search The Spill in your podcast app. No Filter is produced by Eliza Ratliff. I'm Mia Friedman, and you can find me on Instagram or Facebook at Mia Friedman, or please sign up for my newsletter at miafriedman.com.au. And I'll see you on Mamma Mia.